All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Let's see. This way, there's not too much light shining on me. Hopefully, everybody can see me, and hopefully, everybody can hear me. Well, we still have a minute before we start officially. Oh, very good. Thanks, April. Um, good, good, good. We still have, well, now at this point, less than a minute until we officially begin. But let's talk about some housekeeping stuff before we get going. Um, so, as you can see on Brightspace, the first quiz is now available. So I just wanted to reiterate a couple of things about the quiz. Uh, there are instructions that you can read before you begin. Basically, what those outline is the number of questions, what they're worth, how much time you have, etc. So there are 10 of 10 very short questions, like true and false and multiple choice style. And each of those are worth 1 mark if you get the answer correct. And then there are 4 short answer questions, which ask you uh, about various ideas and concepts that you have to elaborate on in your own words. Those are worth up to 5 marks each. So the entire quiz is out of 30 marks. Now, of course, you have until 1 minute to midnight on Friday um, to do the quiz. But once you begin, there's a 90-minute time limit. So even though the quiz is open book, I do recommend studying a little bit before you begin. I would review your notes. I would make sure that you've read the readings. Um, you can rewatch the lectures on double speed if you want. All good ways to study. And then, yeah, once you begin, there is a time limit. You can, of course, still consult your learning materials. It is an open book test. And I just remind you all that here, open book means your learning materials only. You can consult your notes, you can have a look at the slides, although you shouldn't be copying and pasting anything. You absolutely cannot use search engines or chat GPT. Um, if I see anything that was obviously identified via a web search or uh, or or generative AI or anything like that, I just won't give marks for it. And by the way, I do give my quizzes to ChatGPT, so I know what an AI generated answer looks like. Um, yeah, so some people are asking where to find the quiz. What you want to do is, yeah, that's one way to find it. Kaya's identified one way to find it. You can go to the Tools tab and then select quizzes, or you can go to this week's course module, and then below the links for the lectures and the links for the PowerPoints, there's a little sub-module with a link to the quiz. So Michael's asking, we don't have the whole day to finish the quiz. No, you have 90 minutes once you begin. So an example question, Jesper, might be, ooh, I don't know. I might ask you to explain one of the arguments that we've covered in the first 2 chapters. Maybe Hume's argument that explain Hume's argument why we're not rationally justified in believing that the future will resemble the past. And you'll have to say, you'll have to write a paragraph or so giving me your answer. And each one of those 5 marks you have to earn by saying something correct. And that's basically how it works. Rachel, that's right. We're only covering what the quiz only covers what we've covered so far. So that's all of chapter 1 and most of chapter 2. We only got through the Gettier cases part uh, of the latter half of chapter two. So we covered rationalism, empiricism, how they differ on a priori knowledge, and Gettier cases, and that's as far as we got. So there's nothing from chapter two that we didn't get a chance to cover. The stuff that we're covering today to finish off chapter two is not on the quiz. Um, Good question. We don't need to provide citations on the short answer. That's something I expect for an essay, um, but not for this. And by the way, your answers don't have to be like super flawless. In fact, that's one of the ways that I know students aren't using AI. You should try and write well, but if there's an odd spelling mistake or grammatical error, um, it's not the end of the world because that tells me that a human wrote it, which is good, especially in this age of AI that we find ourselves in. Yeah, Chloe, 5 points in each answer. You want to make sure you hit five correct things. Yeah, definitely don't do that. Because I know you won't, Jesper, but I can, there are ways. I don't use AI detection software. I don't use it because we're advised not to, because it can generate false positives. Um, but I do, after teaching the number of courses online that I have, I do just kind of have a sense for what's written by AI, and I can usually identify it. Um, so I just won't give marks for stuff that's written with AI or copy and pasted from a Google search. And by the way, you really want to put the answers in your own words, because when you take something in your mind and try and reformulate it into your own words, it really does force you to think about um, those concepts and those ideas. And that's good. No, Jeremiah, I'd say don't copy and paste from your own notes. Um, well, Jonas, you shouldn't be accused of it. Professors should not accuse you of using AI, and I will not accuse you. Um, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Like, I'm not going to send you an email like you used AI, didn't you? I'm not going to do that. Um, Interesting question, April. Gorilla Glue. Um,
Yeah, I have my little guy here. He's homesick and he's creating something for our cats. And he found the Gorilla Glue.
yes. Kaya
He
says
got it
rubbing
home.
alcohol.
I've got alcohol wipes. I don't think they're working well.
Yeah, I don't know. Jonas says goo be gone, goo gone, but I don't know if that's safe.
Ooh.
I'm not see I'm no expert outside of philosophy on adhesives. I was thinking some kind of solvent myself, like nail polish remover, but I don't know what
Okay.
chemicals are safe to mix. I don't know if that will
Gooby Gone,
yeah.
we actually have the Gorilla Gooby Gone. I think we'll give that a try. Would you like to say good morning and thank you? Good morning. Thank
Good morning. I hope you figure it out. I'm sure that with time it will come off anyway, but I think, yeah, the safest thing might actually be Kaya's suggestion, rubbing alcohol.
Okay.
But I just don't know how chemicals mix and whether that could cause some kind of chemical reaction, right?
No, that's completely fair. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. I
Yeah.
appreciate
We're
it.
crowdsourcing it.
Yeah,
Okay.
welcome to my household.
So there's a few more quiz questions. Um, I aim for a turnaround time of 2 weeks. This is a big class, so your TAs and I will be working hard to get everything done. Maximum time should be 2 weeks. Um, uh, okay, looks like Mahmoud's question was answered. And I don't prepare practice questions, but you can just You can practice on your own. The way that I practiced on my own when I was an undergraduate was I wrote down important terms and concepts from my notes in my textbook, once again, in my own words on a study sheet. So I would simply write a paragraph on David Hume in my own words and then study that. But don't copy and paste it because, again, when you have to reword something, it forces you to think very carefully about what you're doing. No, last week's stuff is on the test, just not what we didn't cover. So we stopped right after Gettier cases. So anything we're covering today and on is not on the test. Well, I mean like full weeks 1 and 2. It's on knowledge and skepticism. And yeah, like Kaya says, there's discussion questions in the textbook that you can use for practice if you want to. Okay, we really should get on with trying to catch up though. So let's share my screen. What we're going to do is try and finish off our slides on knowledge. So this is right after we left off on the Gettier cases. Remember those cases where we have a justified true belief, but it doesn't seem uh, like our subject has knowledge, even though she has a justified true belief. The belief is true and it's justified, but it's not really connected to reality in the right way, like the broken clock example we used. It looks like my cat's hungry. Oh, here you are, sir. Okay, he shouldn't bug us now. As it says on this slide, we can think of Gettier cases as exposing what we call defective justifications, justifications that just are good enough. There are 10 multiple choice questions. Well, mix of multiple choice and true false, and then there are 4 short answer questions. And this is also outlined in the instructions for the quiz, which you'll see before you begin. Okay, cat. Show cat. Here is cat. Whoops. Where are you, cat? There you are. There's another one down on the floor, but I can't quite get my laptop to view him. Okay, so Gettier cases, what do? They show us that the justifications that we think we have for our true beliefs aren't good enough for those beliefs to count as knowledge, because there might be some information that we're out there that we're not aware of. And if we became aware of this Gettier fact, we could call it, then we'd change our beliefs, right? Like think back to the No-Got Ford case. S believes that someone in the office owns a Ford. He believes it's Miss No-Got, which is incorrect, although his sort of background belief that someone owns a Ford is correct. And if S were to be given new information, he would change his belief such that he would believe that Miss Havitt owns the Ford, not Miss No-Got. We call propositions that express Gettier facts defeaters. So, as Crumley says, a defeater provides some reason for thinking that one or more of the justifying beliefs or assumptions is mistaken. And this leads us to what we could call the indefeasibility view of knowledge. So, for our Drew beliefs to count as instances of knowledge, they don't just have to be justified, they have to be indefeasibly justified. That means that there shouldn't be any other propositions that could undermine our justifications for the beliefs that we hold. So, as I said earlier, if we modify the Ford No-Got case, it's true that S believes someone in the office owns a Ford, and it's true that S's belief is true, but S, more specifically, believes that Miss No-Got has a Ford, when actually it's Miss Havett who drives the Ford. So, maybe reliable testimony from someone in the office, like, "Hey, have you seen Miss Havett's new Ford?" That would change S's beliefs. That would be a defeater for the particular version of that belief that Miss Havett owns a Ford, which is a false belief, actually. So this it's hard to see with this example because this example doesn't really work, but um, think of the broken clock case example. Like, say I walk into the philosophy department and it just happens to be 4:30 p.m. and I look at the broken clock, which just happens to have stopped at 4:30, and I form the belief that it's 4:30 p.m. All right, well, that belief is true and it's justified, but what would a defeater look like? Um, which would show me that my true belief doesn't count as knowledge and would cause me to change my beliefs. Well, someone else in the department might see me looking at the time and say something like, "I wonder when they're going to fix that clock," which would cause me to realize that the clock is broken and that my belief, although it is justified, is not indefeasibly justified because there's a defeater out there, a true proposition that would cause me to revise my beliefs if I heard that proposition. So this highlights an important feature of knowledge, and that is that knowledge should be extendable. So new information, if we really have knowledge, then new information shouldn't weaken our justification. If new information shows us that our justification isn't good, then what we've got is a defeater. And that means that we didn't know. We had a true belief, perhaps, but not knowledge. So is everybody clear on this idea of a defeater? Okay, most of you, but just for those who are a little uncertain, a defeater is just some sentence, some true sentence that could show you that your knowledge is indefeasibly justified. It means that you have reasons for holding your beliefs, but those reasons may not be good ones. And if you got new information in the form of a defeater, you might revise your beliefs or come to realize that you have merely a true belief, not knowledge. And that leads us to the indefeasibility view, which is that knowledge isn't just a justified true belief, it's an indefeasibly justified true belief. But there could be misleading defeaters out there. Misleading defeaters, as Crumley says, undermine justifications because only part of the story is known. So, what's a misleading defeater? Um, well, Crumley's example is drawn from uh, the case of Andrew Wakefield and the MMR vaccine, and Wakefield's claims. It's curious that he actually doesn't name Wakefield in the book, but I think that it's actually important to know who this guy is because he is such a huge source of misinformation on this topic. Um, so we'll call our claim C. The MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine is safe and effective. And I think while all of you will have had this, I think I don't remember if this was the same vaccine I received when I was young. I think it might have been. But it's a vaccine that's given in a couple of doses, and it provides immunity from measles, mumps, and the rubella virus. Now, in 1998, Wakefield published a study in The Lancet, which is a very prestigious medical journal, which claimed that these vaccines cause autism. So this is a misleading defeater. This is a defeater that would undermine C, but it's misleading because Wakefield actually faked his data. Um, so his paper was eventually retracted, and his medical license was actually revoked over this. Um, Nonetheless, many people still believe, and this really is due to this one guy, that vaccines cause autism. And let me be absolutely clear, they do not. Okay. Vaccines undergo very, very rigorous human trials. And although there is always a risk for some injury to occur, those risks are very, very low compared to the benefits of the vaccine. And in any case, we can say that vaccines just don't cause autism. So this paper is retracted, but a lot of people still believe in this defeater. But before it came out that Wakefield had published his fraudulent paper, before it was widely known, then this claim would have been a misleading defeater. So it would have defeated your belief in C, that the MMR vaccine is safe and effective, even though C is true. So that is a misleading defeater. Yeah, that's right, April. I remember in the early 2000s, myself is when the early to mid 2000s, I think, is when I started seeing this claim myself on the internet. And I think the reason it took off then was probably just due to the nature of the internet. Social media was getting going. I mean, there were message boards, but then along came Facebook in the mid 2000s, um, which certainly didn't help. Yeah, mom groups. Yep. Is a misleading defeater just a false premise? Um, it it could be a false premise in an argument. Yeah, I think it could be. Like for example, you can if you're thinking through whether to vaccinate yourself or your children, right? You could think, okay, well, it's claimed that this vaccine is safe and effective, but I don't know, the Facebook mom group says this vaccine might cause autism. I mean, I'm not saying that all Facebook moms are anti-vaxxers. They certainly aren't. Um, but if you did uh, adopt that belief and use it in your thought process and your deliberation, yeah, it would be a false premise, absolutely. But what a defeater is in its defeaterness, what makes it a defeater is that it defeats a belief that you hold. So this gets us to the no false premise view of knowledge and justification, and that is that false beliefs cannot be a part of our justification. So, on the no false premise view, you're not allowed to have any false beliefs justifying any other beliefs. So, if somebody believes um, that the MMR vaccine causes autism and chooses not to vaccinate their child, for example, then we would say, well, you have a false belief serving as justification for another belief, in this case, the belief that you ought not to vaccinate your child, right? If your justification for that is that the MMR vaccine causes autism, well, that's a false premise. Yeah, well, it doesn't quite so much matter whether it's after the fact or not. It's just that um like look, we have lots of beliefs and we feel like we know. Like a lot of those beliefs we feel like they count as knowledge because we have reasons for believing them. But on the no false premise view, we're just saying that those beliefs that are justified by other false beliefs, those beliefs can't count as knowledge, right? Like the Gettier case, when I'm looking at the broken clock. So let's say somebody lets me know the clock is broken. They give me that defeater. The clock is broken, and it just happens to be reading the right time while I'm looking at it. Um, well, before I hear that defeater, I might have this uh, assumption that the clock is working properly when I look at it, right? And that's a false belief that can't serve as part of the justification for my belief that it's 4:30, right? I kind of tacitly assume that the clock is working, but that's false. And I can be shown that it's false, right? There's also an idea called reliabilism. Oh, well, good question, Cormac. Yeah, agree that knowledge has to be 100% concrete. Who would agree that false beliefs would be valid just well, nobody would I don't think any serious philosopher would, but perhaps some people think that they're like when they're epistemically lucky, then that still counts as knowledge. A bit like the example we went over last time of Captain America being worthy of lifting Thor's hammer, right? I knew it, but did he know it? No, he had a hunch, and the hunch was confirmed. Paul, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had to get my microphone working. Just back to the, I guess the misleading defeaters. Going to your clock example. So you were to go in to look at the clock, and it was say the clock had been repaired,
Mm,
but the person who told you that clock is broken didn't know it had been repaired. Would that be a misleading defeater?
yes, yeah,
Okay,
because then I'm getting the wrong. So they've got the wrong information, and then I'm getting the wrong information, which defeats a belief that I'm actually justified in having. So
okay,
that's what a misleading defeater is something that defeats a true belief that you actually are justified in having.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Like, you know those viral facts that go viral on social media? I saw one the other day. Um, this is a classic one. Somebody will tweet or post or whatever something like the following. They'll say Super Mario isn't saying it's a me, Mario. What he's actually saying is it's me, Mario, with the claim that Itsumi is Japanese for super. So what Mario is actually saying um, Super Mario. He's just saying it in Japanese. And claims like this go viral. Now, uh, perhaps you take that social media testimony as justification for this little bit of trivia. Like, oh, Super Mario isn't actually saying it's a me, he's saying Itsumi. This is not true, by the way. This is covered quite well on Snopes.com. Mario is in fact saying it's a me, Mario. Itsumi in Japanese does not mean super. I forget what it means. Its meaning actually varies depending on, well, because of the nature of kanji, the nature of the writing system, its meaning depends on the symbols you use. But Okaya says it can mean when. So it doesn't actually mean that. But people hear these little viral factoids and they think, oh, I thought he was saying it's a me, but he's actually saying Itsumi. Um, so that's a misleading defeater because that's just some nonsense that someone has posted to try and get views, right? So another misleading defeater. Another one I've seen is the whole what 70% rain means in a weather forecast. That's another one. The claim there is that when you see something like 70% chance of precipitation, it means that 70% of the area will get rained on. I mean, people, you need to you really, if you see something like this, a little bit of trivia, you really do have to double check it on the internet because people will just post nonsense um to get views. 70% chance of rain means there's a 70% probability that it will rain. That's what it means. Um anyway, another theory of epistemology is reliabilism, which is not as strict as what we've been looking at, right? Um, Alvin Goldman is the most well-known reliabilist, probably. And here, connection to truth and reminder, truth in philosophy is the way the world is what we're really concerned about when it comes to justifying our true beliefs. Now, on reliabilism, you have a justified true belief if your belief is true and there is a reliable connection between the belief and the truth. And what does that mean? That means there's got to be reliable belief forming processes at play. So these are psychological processes, these are cognitive processes, right? So if you think back to the barn example, excuse the tissue paper, by the way. I've the sniffles. If you think back to the barn example, like when the father's taking his son through the country, and there's barns everywhere, but unbeknownst to the family, some of these are facades that have put up that they've put up because they're filming. I don't know, what did we settle on? Barnyard 2, Electric Boogaloo. So they're filming this Barnyard movie, and the father could have easily pointed to a facade and said, that's a barn, and he would have been wrong. But he was lucky. He pointed to a real barn. And in this process, he relies on reliable belief forming processes. His senses are working more or less optimally. You know, he's had a good breakfast, he's had a good sleep, he's not intoxicated or inebriated or brain injured or anything. And so he can see what looks like a barn, identify it as such. And he's formed this belief based on his perception that that's a barn. That's a reliable belief forming process, right? Or maybe there need to be, as Armstrong says, reliable connections between beliefs and the environment. Which, I mean, I don't really see a whole lot of difference here because I am a big fan of the extended mind hypothesis, which means that cognition is not something that it's not some disembodied thinky process that only happens in our heads. We take advantage of our bodies and the environments and the situatedness of our bodies in the environment for reasoning all the time. Simple example would be like counting on your fingers. Um, any way you slice it, your beliefs have to come about in a way that they're likely to be true via some reliable belief forming process. Um, is he defeated even if the belief is he justified even if the belief can be defeated? Well, a reliabilist would say yes. Like knowledge doesn't have to be indefeasibly justified. So remember, the indefeasibility view is that if you have a justified true belief, if there's some defeater out there, then your knowledge isn't indefeasibly justified and you only have a true belief. But a reliabilist would say, like, no, it's good enough that way to count as knowledge. Um, yeah, I suppose I see your worry, Cormac, right? Like, isn't it true that, what is a reliable belief forming process, right? I'm not as worried as I used to be. After all, we have evolved mechanisms of coming to know about the world. like our sense modalities and so forth. Um, there are we employ heuristics, which which are like little cognitive shortcuts, little rules of thumb that we've evolved for thinking. And they're not perfect, but they often work well enough. Um, well, it would have to be demonstrated that this is a re this that this is a reliable means of coming to form true beliefs. But I mean, like, how skeptical do you want to get? Like, I can look with my eyes and see that there's a coffee cup on my desk. Do you really want to go like full Descartes and say, well, maybe you're living in a simulation, right? Um, so yeah, it's probably okay to be a reliabilist. Um, okay. Reliable processes. Well, we'll see some examples where we're getting there. Um, um, yeah, that's the problem, Jonathan, right? Like if he had pointed to a barn facade, then we wouldn't want to say that he's correct because the belief is not connected to the world in the right way. We can formalize this as follows. We can say that the belief must be the result of a reliable belief forming process. There must be no alternative that could lead S to have a false belief. So in the barn case, we do actually have an alternative. He's using a reliable process, but there is an alternative where there are literally alternative barns that are not really barns. They're trick barns. And the belief must be true. So in the barn facade example, we don't have condition two. Condition two is not met. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, you're not wrong. But then again, there's also, I mean, there are pretty reliable ways to form beliefs. Like, um, no doubt all of you are forming lots of beliefs nowadays, because you're university students. So you go to class and you get the reliable testimony of an expert in each of your classes. Like each of your professors is an expert in their field. So you can probably take what they say as being true. And if your professor is a good one, then when they learn that maybe they accidentally gave you a bit of misinformation. Maybe your professor told you that Super Mario was saying "It's me Mario" and not "It's a me Mario." I don't know. They will correct that. So, um, so the reliable testimony of an expert is a reliable part of a belief forming process, right? Um, so it's not. I don't know. I don't know if I would say that there's. I wouldn't say there's. It's rare that there's alternatives. I wouldn't say that it's rare that there's never any alternatives, but we have to be careful. Although there are some interesting problems with this view. Um, so Lawrence Bonjour um, says reliabilism isn't a good idea because it could count cases of irrational belief as being justified. And irrational beliefs, Bonjour wants to argue, shouldn't count as knowledge, which I think is true. Like, what does irrational mean in this context? It means that we're either violating some principle of proper reasoning, or we're just not using reasoning at all. So he's got a really funny example, Norman the Reliable Clairvoyant. So Norman is a clairvoyant and he can see the future, but he's got no reason to believe that he is a clairvoyant. Uh, and he happens to be reliable, but Norman just doesn't have any, he just hasn't formed the belief that he is a reliable clairvoyant. We could say that as far as Norman knows, he thinks that everyone is like this, and he doesn't realize he's different. Now, Norman is using his powers, and he comes to realize that he comes to know that the president is in New York City. His belief is reliably justified because he's truly a clairvoyant, and he is a reliable one at that. But he's justified his knowledge on a hunch, not with reasons, right? And this is why I actually teach a class, interestingly, called The Philosophy of the Paranormal, where we critically and skeptically examine paranormal claims, such as those of clairvoyance. And I would probably, if you were to take that class, I would tell you that even if your psychic or your clairvoyant were correct, you still shouldn't believe them because they can't explain what they're doing. I mean, I don't believe that they actually have psychic powers in the first place, but you still shouldn't believe them even if they did because they can't articulate why they're correct. Um, so they're using as their justification a feeling, a hunch. So even if they're correct and even if it's justified by, I don't know, what seems like a reliable process, um, it's irrational. This is a bit of an extreme example, but the point is that Bonjour is trying to emphasize that we shouldn't let these irrational beliefs figure in as knowledge within our worldviews. So Norman's belief that the president is in New York is justified because he's a reliable clairvoyant. He reliably gets hunches about the future. But Bonjour then goes to ask, why is not the mere fact that there is no way, as far as he knows or believes, for him, Norman, to have obtained this information, a sufficient reason for classifying this belief as an unfounded hunch and ceasing to accept it? And if Norman does not do this, is he not thereby being epistemically irrational and irresponsible? And that's interesting because I don't know, some reliabilists might say that um, might say, for example, that our hunches are reliable because they're not magical. They're based on intuition, sort of our brain making an unconscious inference based on past experience. Um, Somebody like Bonjour might say, no, maybe that's still being irrational, and um, maybe we shouldn't count beliefs arrived at via that process as instances of knowledge. April, go ahead.
So would that be like when people say they have a gut feeling?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, oftentimes our gut might be correct, right? Um, it's not magic, right? Like intuition isn't magical or mysterious. There are two ways that humans can think about things. One is rapidly and unconsciously, and the other is slowly, deliberatively, and consciously. And we evolved to have these gut reactions because they save time, right? Like if you hear a rustle in the trees and feel like there's a presence behind you and you leap out of the way, um, well, that might save your life, right? Like in our evolutionary past. Like if you think it's a predator and you're wrong, okay, no big deal, right? But if you don't think it's a predator and you're wrong, bleh, dead, right? So a reliabilist might say that that's a reliable belief forming process. Bonjour would say, no, you're being irrational when you do that, right? So there's a bit of a debate there. Um, Kaya asks, can't this example be used in application that could cause harm when confronted, the person who first said whatever it is can simply get off the hook by I don't know. I think that's more like what we would call a bad faith argument. And Norman the clairvoyant doesn't seem to be acting in bad faith, right? Like he really believes his own hunches. Um, whereas a person who says, I never claim to be a reliable source of information might that is something you might see in a bad faith argument. Somebody who claims to be, you know what I mean, right? You're in an argument with somebody and somebody is arguing for something and then it turns out they're incorrect and they say, well, I never said I was an expert in that field, you know. Well, um, okay. But why were you arguing with me then, right? Like this kind of example, right? Okay, I'm really trying to finish these slides because we're falling behind. Um, so why is Norman being irrational? Well, Bonjour thinks that justification means that you can provide reasons for your beliefs. Norman can't do this, and reliabilism doesn't seem to require that we do this. But Alvin Goldman disagrees. He says reliabilism requires only, in effect, that beliefs in the external world be suitably caused. So if one wishes, one can simply employ the term justification, that belief causation of this kind counts as justification. In this sense, of course, my theory does require justification. Oh. But this is entirely different from the sort of justification demanded by Cartesianism. So, those reliable connections between belief and the world, the reliable causation of our beliefs is all we need, Goldman says, to count as justification. So, I don't know. Is this irrational or not? Depends what you mean by justification, right? Goldman thinks that to be justified is for that belief to be reliably caused. But Bonjour means something different. He means that to be justified, you need to have the right reasons for having that belief. Alvin Goldman does not believe that Norman the clairvoyant knows the president will be in New York, right? He agrees with Bonjour that sure, Norman just has a hunch, right? Um, and that leads us to a final important point, right? A reliably produced belief on reliabilism is justified unless there's another reliable process that could undermine, right? Now, Norman is relying on a hunch, and there's some other better process that he could be using, like reading a newspaper. President visits New York. Da, 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 extra, extra, right? Something like that. Okay, we finished that set. Now we've got to move on to theories of justification. So this is chapter 3. So we're talking a lot about justification here. We want our beliefs, our true beliefs, to be supported by reason or evidence, right? And a theory of justification would tell us what exactly it means for a belief to be justified. It would specify the necessary and sufficient conditions for justified belief. So it would tell us what we need, what you have to have for a belief to count as justified, and what would be good enough to count as a justified belief. That's what necessity and sufficiency ultimately boils down to. Why do we want a theory of justification anyway? Well, one reason is that we want to know whether our beliefs are epistemically credible, right? Do I have good reasons for believing the things that I do? Right? I might say to you, for example, and this, I believe, was an example I used last time I taught this class because it was really happening, but I believed that there was a skunk living under my porch. And you might say, Professor Redstone, why do you believe that? And I might give you reasons for my belief. Well, I can smell the skunk, and I've seen it wandering around to and fro from under my porch, right? Um, So, um, you you might not just want to know what I believe, but also why I believe that. And in the process of inquiring why I believe what I believe, you're going to get to know whether I have good reasons for holding the beliefs that I have, right? Or think back to the previous example, right, of the Wakefield case. If somebody believes that vaccines cause autism, I might ask, well, why do you believe that? Well, I heard in my Facebook group that this study by Dr. Wakefield proved that vaccines cause autism, right? And that might reveal, oh, okay, so we actually don't have a good reason for having that belief, right? For having the belief that vaccines cause autism. So we also want to know why, like how our beliefs come to have initial credibility in the first place, and whether there are some foundational beliefs upon which other beliefs are built. So that's the sort of first set of reasons. The second set of reasons is that um, we want to know why it's better to have a justified true belief than it is to have a um, a true but unjustified belief. Right. And we already have a bit of like a picture of an answer here. Remember Socrates is in the Meno by Plato. Plato has Socrates tell us that knowledge is better than true belief or an opinion because true beliefs are kind of like the images of Daedalus, right? If they're not fastened down, they'll get up and walk away. They won't abide long. Um, but if you fasten them down, they'll stay. And that's the difference between knowledge and knowledge on the one hand and true belief or right opinion on the other. With knowledge, we have our beliefs fastened down with a reason, with a cause. And if you have good justification for your beliefs, then the likelihood that your beliefs are true is higher. Think about this. If I ask you why you believe a certain thing, a certain proposition, you probably give other beliefs as part of your justification. So part of the reason why you hold belief A is because of belief B, C, and D. So um, we rely on other beliefs. We justify our beliefs by relying on these other beliefs. And there are lots of different kinds of beliefs that might justify the belief in question. Um, Perceptual beliefs are one kind of belief. Right? We form beliefs on the basis of what we perceive. Like I said a moment ago, I believe that there is a coffee cup on the table because I perceive it there. So I have this perception and I form a belief on that basis. Oh, Kaya, good question. Well, it's only exempted by certain people, like William James, right? I don't want to get ahead of myself, but William James argued that um, it's actually all right to believe in God in the absence of evidence because it can make a positive difference in your life. Um, which is a really weird, I mean, okay, like I like William James. He seems like a cool guy. Um, William James is like if I had a philosophical time machine and I could go and visit a philosopher from the past, I think I would like to sit down and have a beer with William James. However, I think he is wrong about a lot, right? Especially his whole pragmatic approach to the truth, where something is true if it has a positive practical value in your life, and that's kind of what he does. When it comes to belief in God, it's like, hey, there's no evidence, so it's okay to believe, to take that leap of faith. Leap of faith is actually Kierkegaard's term, not James's term, but I think it works there. Um, and that's because belief in God is what he calls a genuine option. And we should be able to look at that next time. Yeah. 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 Um, well, yeah, and you can see, yeah. Or and William Clifford again, not to get ahead of myself, but Clifford is very, Clifford is like, it's wrong to believe in false premises, or false propositions, even if no one is harmed, right? And that's what his ship example is about, right? Like, the owner of a ship, his ship is in a terrible state and it could sink on its next voyage, but he sends it anyway. Now, obviously, if the ship had sunk, we could say that this owner of the ship had done something wrong. But Clifford says, no, no, no. Even if the ship didn't sink, he still did something wrong. He believed in something he shouldn't have. So even if the ship made it and nobody died, he still was wrong, right? So we'll talk about that more next time. But yeah, there are lots of different kinds of beliefs that we use to justify other beliefs, like perceptual beliefs, or perhaps we have background beliefs, right? These are beliefs that we acquire over the course of our lives, about ourselves in the world, and how the world works. Um, we form beliefs on the basis of testimony, right? Like, the beliefs that you're forming now in this class are largely due to testimony, um, either mine or that of Jack Crumley II, our textbook author, right? Um, Now, what we want to do as good little epistemologists is try and work out which sources provide reliable evidence, right? Which of these sources can provide us with true beliefs, and which of these beliefs can justify other beliefs? And there are two general approaches. Um, oh, goodness. There are two general approaches that we could take here: foundationalism or coherence theory. On foundationalism, as you may have guessed, our beliefs are justified by certain foundational beliefs. And those beliefs are foundational in the sense that they do not need justification. And we sort of build our other beliefs upon those foundational ones. On coherence theory, our beliefs kind of hang together like a spider web. And beliefs are all sort of interconnected and mutually supporting. So there's no single set of foundational beliefs. And we're going to focus on foundationalism for now. One example of a foundationalist that you might have anticipated here is, of course, Rene Descartes. Rene Descartes' foundation was the cogito. Here's how he opens the Meditations, by the way. I'll read this to you. It is now some years since I detected how many were the false beliefs that I had from my earliest youth admitted as true, and how doubtful was everything I had since constructed on this basis. And from that time I was convinced that I must build once and for all a serious that I must once and for all seriously undertake to rid myself of all the opinions which I had formerly accepted, and commence to build anew from the foundation, if I wanted to establish any firm and permanent structure in the sciences. Now, by going through the dream argument and the demon argument, Descartes arrives at the cogito, the one thing he can know with certainty. That is, I am, I exist, or I think, therefore I am, right? So that's the one thing Descartes can know that doesn't need to be justified by another belief. And he can build up all his other beliefs, like the nature of the mind and the body, the nature of the self, the nature of God and the external world, etc. He can build all that back up using the cogito as a foundation. So that's an example. I mean, Descartes is a pretty clear example of a foundationalist, right? And we've already talked about Descartes Descartes at length, so there's probably not much need to go on about this point. But I guess you could make that argument, Kale, but let's not worry about it, right? Let's just say that the cogito is a belief that it's the bedrock, it's the epistemic bedrock, and that's where he's going to build everything from. There's strong foundationalism and what we could call modest foundationalism. So, each one is concerned with dealing with the regress argument. So, what is that? Well, the regress argument is as follows. We justify our beliefs by appealing to other beliefs. Okay. So if I believe that, for example, there is a cat on my couch, presently there is not, but let's imagine that there is. I form the belief that there's a cat on my couch. So how do I justify this? Well, maybe I appeal to some perceptual beliefs. So I see the cat on the couch. I'm also appealing to background beliefs about what cats look like. I know what they look like. They have whiskers and ears and cute little faces, little fur. They come in different colors, etc. I know that I have cats. I've got two of them. But these beliefs also require justification, right? Um, sure, I believe I know what cats look like, but can I trust what I'm seeing? Maybe someone's been playing a trick on me my whole life. Maybe the world is conspiring against me such that they've made me think that what I call cats are actually dogs, and what I call dogs are actually cats. So then I'd have a false belief. Then it would turn out that there's actually a dog on my couch, not a cat. Um, and the worry is, does this keep on going, right? Is it beliefs all the way down, as it were? Um, that's the worry. Because whenever we get a regress in philosophy or science, it's an indicator that there's a problem. There's a problem with the way that we're thinking about things. So I'm sure that there's an example you can think of where you've had some belief that turned out to be wrong, which you no doubt believed because, in part because it was justified by other beliefs, and some of those might be wrong, right? Um, I'm trying to think of an example of a false belief that I had, but can't seem to think of one. Maybe somebody can volunteer an example in the chat. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess that would count, Kaya, like believing in Santa because you also believe in the Tooth Fairy. But then again, you also have, there's also your parents' testimony, right? Like, oh, Santa Claus is visiting tonight. Get to bed, kids, and leave the milk and cookies out. And also because there's background beliefs at play, like when I was young, I delighted in watching all of the Christmas television specials, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty the Snowman, although holy moly, Frosty was not a smart person. Uh, he was made of snow, sure, and he came to life one day, but uh, yeah, it was weird. I remember watching that again when I got a bit older, and I thought, wow, Frosty's an idiot. Um, anyway, don't worry about it. I'm not actually a Grinch. Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown. Classic. But in a lot of these, right, Santa Claus features. So perhaps that would be part of your background beliefs, right? Yeah, smoking. Oh, no, Amin is a Grinch. Yeah. I mean, uh, yeah, he is crystallized frozen water animated by a magic hat. Um, so yeah. Um, yeah, okay. Oh, Jonas, yeah, the example you're using. Yeah, like Olaf, yeah, from Frozen. That's right. Although I like Olaf. So smoking not having any negative side effects. Yeah, I mean, that was certainly justified by other beliefs, which you might have formed by watching or looking at advertisements for cigarettes, right? And you can find these. I'll leave you to go and find them via a Google search. But yeah, I mean, there used to be ads in magazines that would be like 4 out of 5 doctors smoke Camels. You know, like doctors, like not this kind of doctor, but medical doctors. Like, oh, well, hey, if the doctor is smoking Camels, it must be a pretty good cigarette. See, um, I mean, that's wild if you think about it. That like, yeah, and that's a good point, Abdul Wahab. They did. The cigarette companies knew for a long time that smoking would kill you. Um, a lot like how some of the earliest research into climate change was done by petroleum companies. They've also known for a long time that the emissions from internal combustion engines are bad for the environment, but they aren't exactly keen on sharing that information. Um, so lots of these, if we form beliefs on the basis of these advertisements or because certain things that we ought to know about cigarettes or petroleum and so forth are being suppressed. Not only does my entire system of beliefs seem tenuous, but it seems like I've got all these false beliefs which are based on yet other false beliefs. It seems hopeless, doesn't it? How can we know anything if we're in such an epistemic situation? But particularly with the regress, like if it's beliefs all the way down, well, that's worrisome. I mean, option number one, we've got an infinite regress. All our beliefs are just based on other beliefs, based on other beliefs, based on other beliefs, so on, ad infinitum to infinity. And that's not good. We want to be foundationalists. We want some foundation. So we can't just go on and on forever. Option two is that the regress does end, but it ends with some beliefs that are not justified. Well, those won't work as our foundation because um, we need beliefs. It's true that our foundational beliefs ought not to require justification, but that's not the same as saying that they're unjustified. They might be like self-evidently true. You know what I mean? So they don't need justification, but that's because they're self-evident. Option three is a circular option. So here, one beliefs maybe depends on another, and then that belief depends on another, and so on, until eventually we circle back to our original belief. This is a little bit like coherentism, but not exactly. Coherentism also wants to avoid circularity, but it does it in a different way. It does it in a way other than identifying foundational beliefs. Or option four, and this is the option that foundationalists opt for. Option four is that our regress terminates at a set of basic beliefs or a basic belief. And these basic beliefs don't require justification. They might be self-evident, for example. So Descartes' basic belief was the cogito, right? So these are epistemically independent. And that is why they don't require justification. They don't require other justification from other beliefs. Um, and there's a little bit of debate about what can count as a basic belief. It maybe perceptual beliefs count, right? Um, maybe maybe introspective beliefs count, right? There could be any number of kinds of beliefs that will work as basic beliefs. And foundationalists will sort of argue over this, try and work out what kinds of belief can count as basic belief. So basic beliefs are sources of justification, and they're justified themselves without appealing to other beliefs. So we don't just have perceptual beliefs as candidates for basic beliefs, but we also have memories. Like, how do I know that I went to, let's see, that I went to the Ontario Science Center when I was a kid? How do I know? Well, I remember being there. I don't need any other justification beyond that. I remember being there. And I remember that weird hallway that I walked through that was all like soundproof or whatever. They had a big ship's propeller, a massive ship's propeller that you could turn with a tiny little hand crank. I really got a kick out of that. And of course, they had a full scale replica of the Canadarm from the space shuttle, which I thought was really groovy. Um, yeah, what if my memory was just a dream? Well, okay. We can have false memories, but perhaps my true memories are the only source of justification, and we rule out false memories. Like if I mistake a dream for something that actually happened, right? Well, Chloe, it might be a risky thing, because memory, yeah, you're right. I mean, every time we remember something, uh, we subtly alter certain details of that memory, and that's just the way that memory works. And well, that's more precisely, that's the way the neuroscience of memory works, right? Because the brain is just such a plastic organ. Um, yeah, and Shania, yeah, that's right. Like, what context are we dealing with? Like in everyday life, um, it's probably okay, but maybe not in a court case because people can misremember, but people can also lie, right? Maybe a priori beliefs that we arrive at via a priori reasoning count as basic. Maybe introspective beliefs, again, beliefs about your own mental states, uh, are okay. So that's one thing that all foundationalist theories have in common with one another is this idea that there are basic beliefs um, that serve as our foundation, and they are justified without relying on other beliefs for their justification. But another feature is that there has to be a justifying connection between those basic beliefs and non-basic belief. Yeah, true memory with inaccurate details. Yeah. Yeah, like what if yeah, that's a good example, Paul. I yeah, maybe remember being at the science center and I remember seeing those totem poles. Uh-oh, no, those are actually at the ROM, right? Yeah, well that's just a misremembering. And we can allow for that. We could say that in cases where you misremember or have a false memory, those don't count. Those can't count. But a true memory can count as the basis of a like as a basic belief. We could just kind of stipulate that in our theory. Kind of like the no false premise view, right? Like um you can't use false beliefs as justification. So as long as your whatever mental state is true, we're good. But if it's false, it won't work as justification, right? So this is really just covered by the no false premise view. So yeah, we have foundational beliefs, but we also have these justified connections between non-basic beliefs and basic beliefs. So we should be able to trace our non-basic belief back to a basic belief or set of basic beliefs. Descartes, of course, as a foundationalist, emphasized a deductive or truth-preserving connection between basic and non-basic beliefs. Um, because Descartes is doing everything from the armchair, right? He's reasoning like, well, I exist. Okay, that's the foundation. And then from there, he reasons that, well, I am not my body. I am my mind. I am a thinking thing. And I'm not identical with my body. I have a body, sure, but my body is not what is essentially me. Rather, my mind is. And Descartes gets there deductively with arguments that are truth preserving, right? But a lot of philosophers today think that inductive reasoning works fine too. We can justify non-basic beliefs by reasoning inductively from a more basic belief, right? So, for example, well, if I read in a book, if I get the reliable testimony of an expert that all ravens are black, um, and I form the belief that the ravens I will see today on campus will be black, that's justified. Although, I guess there's cases of albinism and so forth. But let's not worry about those examples. The point is, we can justify the connections between basic and non-basic beliefs deductively or inductively. In making this distinction, though, and what kind of connections we prefer, we're also distinguishing between strong and modest foundationalism. So modest foundationalism is fallibilist. Strong foundationalism isn't. And remember, fallibilism says that, even if there's some evidence out there which can show you that your previously accepted justification was wrong, we can still say that you knew something before you became aware of that new fact that overrided your previous justification. So on modest foundationalism, where we have fallibilism, your beliefs, your true beliefs that are like where your justification is good enough, count as knowledge. But on strong foundationalism, that's not strong enough. So let's look at strong foundationalism. We've only got about 4 minutes left, but we'll try and get through this slide. So strong foundationalism, or Cartesian or infallible foundationalism, has it that basic beliefs can't be mistaken. And that's because justification for our non-basic beliefs is only transmitted via deduction. And deduction is truth preserving, right? That's what a deductive argument is. If the premises are true and you follow the rules of reasoning, your conclusion has to be true. Your conclusion will necessarily follow from the premises. So if you start with false premises, then your non-basic beliefs will be mistaken. So your basic beliefs have to be correct. They can't be mistaken. These beliefs about which we could be mistaken don't meet the standards that strong foundationalists hold for beliefs. And here, basic beliefs might include something like belief about our own mental states. That is introspective belief. Like right now, I'm sleepy. You can probably tell. Although I'm not drinking as much coffee as I usually do. Hey, maybe that's why I'm sleepy. No, actually, I'm sleepy because I've been burning the candle at both ends these days. But regardless, how do I know I'm sleepy? Well, I introspect. Like, I feel rather sleepy. So how could I be mistaken about that? Well, we'll see. It's actually funny that uh, Crumley uses a dress as an example. how can we be mistaken about the color of a dress? The internal experience of color that we see. We can't be wrong about how it seems to us, it turns out, but we can be wrong about the color. These are self-evidential beliefs. Um, and maybe this is too strong. After all, a lot of people endorse some modest foundationalism. Looks like we're not going to get to the dress today. But what do we think? That's strong foundationalism. Like being colorblind, well, yeah, I mean, if you say couldn't see red and you looked at a red object and you said that object is gray, I don't know. You'd be wrong about the color of the object, but you cannot be wrong about your subjective experience of the color of the object. That's what you can't be wrong about. You can't be wrong that it appears gray to you. Restate what an inductive inference is. Yeah, so induction, especially enumerative induction. Well, there's two kinds that generally get talked about. The first is enumerative induction, and that is when we take specific examples and reason our way toward general principles. So if I go to the park and all of the swans I see three or four swans and they're all white, and then I form the belief that all swans everywhere are white, then what I'm doing is called enumerative induction. And there's also abduction, which is like argument to the best explanation. So the example I used earlier was I hear a crash and I come downstairs in the middle of the night and I see that one of my potted plants has been knocked over. Um, the best, most likely explanation is that my cats were fooling around and knocked the plant over. That's most likely because I have cats who are quite active at night. They run around and get up to all kinds of shenanigans. That's far more likely than, say, having a poltergeist, a noisy ghost who knocks over the plants just because, right? Yeah, I think strong foundationalism, well, rationalism is um a theory about what knowledge is. And foundationalism is more related to how our beliefs are justified. So rationalism has it that the intellect is the source of knowledge. That's where knowledge comes from. And foundationalism, strong foundationalism, is a theory of justification that says your foundational beliefs have to be correct and independently justified, or self-justified, almost self-evident. Can you make a mistake about your mental state? That's a good question, David. Your question is very good. Can you be mistaken about your own mental state? Maybe. We'll have to talk about this next time. Maybe. I wouldn't say that's a mental state, though. ADHD is not a mental state, but there might be mental states associated with it. Um, yeah, it's actually a couple minutes after the end of class, so we better stop. But we'll finish these slides and then we'll look at coherentism next time. And by the way, good luck on your tests, everyone. I'm sure, I mean, especially those of you who have been here for the live lectures, you're all doing a really great job. You're all asking really good questions. I'm sure those of you who are following along on YouTube are also doing great. So um, I'll see you all on Thursday, okay? Have a good one. Take care. Bye for now.